Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Turkey says 33 of its soldiers were killed by a Syrian airstrike in northwestern Idlib province. The governor of Hatay province, Rahimi Dogan, says 32 others were wounded in the attack. The losses mark the highest number of fatalities suffered by Turkey in a single day since tensions escalated between Damascus and Ankara last month. This report has the details.
Tensions in Syria have been high since Turkish and Syrian forces came to blows in Idlib province, leading to hundreds of casualties. In the small hours of Friday, Turkey suffered the biggest blow yet to its campaign to secure its safe zone.
As a result of the airstrikes, 33 soldiers are martyred. None of our wounded soldiers who are being treated in hospital are in critical condition. May our martyrs rest in peace. I wish speedy recovery for our wounded soldiers.
In retaliation, Turkey bombed every known Syrian military target after a 6-hour-long emergency meeting chaired by President Tayyip Erdogan. Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu spoke to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg over the assault. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has repeated his call for an immediate ceasefire in the region. Idlib is the last opposition-held stronghold in the country and home to 4 million civilians.
NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg has urged Russia and Syria to halt their Idlib offensive. He said the military alliance stood in solidarity with Turkey, which lost 33 soldiers in an airstrike by the Syrian government forces. Speaking in Brussels, Stoltenberg said NATO members condemned the indiscriminate airstrikes. The alliance called for Moscow and Damascus to fully respect the international law. The chief also called on the two countries to back the UN efforts for a peaceful solution and the return to the 2018 ceasefire. Meanwhile, the leaders of Russia and Turkey held crisis talks to scale down tensions following the airstrike. A Turkish official said President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will speak with the leaders of the US, France, Germany and the UK to discuss Syria. Meanwhile, Pakistan has also expressed deep concern over the killing of Turkish soldiers in Syrian airstrike in Idlib. Syria says Israeli forces have killed a civilian and wounded 3 soldiers in an air attack near the annexed Golan Heights. State media says Israeli missiles targeted army positions at Katanye, Al-Huriyat and town of Quneitra. Quneitra Governor Humam Dibyat confirmed the death of a civilian. Dibyat identified the dead man as Adil Tawil and said that he worked at a police station. There was no immediate comment from the Israeli military. The Israeli attack comes after a Syrian linked to the Lebanese Hezbollah was killed in a cross-border drone strike yesterday. Israel has approved the construction of nearly 1,800 illegal settler homes in the occupied West Bank. In a statement, Israel's Defense Minister Naftali Bennett said Tel Aviv will not give an inch of land to the Arabs. Anti-settlement NGO Peace Now says a total of 1,739 homes have been earmarked, most of which are deep inside the West Bank. It said 1,036 have been given first stage approval, while 703 have received final stage approval. The approval of these units comes 4 days ahead of the general election in Israel. The announcement also marks the latest in a recent string of promises by Israeli officials to expand the settlements which are illegal under the international law. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg are visiting Afghanistan tomorrow. This visit comes on the day of peace deal signing between the U.S. and the Taliban. Afghanistan's presidential spokesman Siddiq Siddiqui says Esper and Stoltenberg will announce a joint declaration with President Ashraf Ghani. Speaking about the peace deal, Esper confessed about base agreement and some annexes in Afghanistan. U.S. officials have already hinted in recent past to pave way for intra-Afghan talks after Washington's deal with the Taliban. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Kabul's prosperity relies on intra-Afghan negotiations. 22 Republican lawmakers have expressed serious concern about the anticipated U.S.-Taliban peace deal. In a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Congress members said the deal will jeopardize American national security interests. The Congress members, led by Liz Cheney, sought assurances that the Trump administration will not place Americans' security at Taliban's hands. The lawmakers said the U.S. troops' withdrawal from Afghanistan will enable terrorist groups to grow stronger and establish safe havens. The letter said any promises made by the Taliban related to counterterrorism cannot be trusted. The Congress members asked Pompeo to ensure no intelligence is shared with the fighters. The US and Taliban are expected to ink the years-long negotiated peace deal tomorrow. For more on this, we have with us Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, who is currently in Doha to attend signing ceremony between the US and the Taliban on the invitation of the Qatari government. Thank you for joining us, Foreign Minister. With the historic first step towards peace in the war-torn country now hours away, how significant has Pakistan's role been in helping the warring sides arrive at this point?
Well, it wouldn't have happened without Pakistan's support and facilitation. And this is being recognized by everyone here. I'm in Doha. People are arriving, delegates are arriving. Approximately 50 countries will be represented, and there'll be a number of foreign ministers participating in the ceremony, signing ceremony tomorrow. Pakistan is being discussed, and I'm glad to share with you, is being discussed positively by the international community. The international press is here. People from all over the world have converged in Doha, and they find this to be a significantly important event that is about to happen, and Pakistan's role is central to it.
Mr. Qureshi, stakeholders are arriving in Doha for the peace deal. During this 7-day token ceasefire deal, there have been incidents of violence which the Taliban have distanced themselves from. How much do you see the US and the Taliban trust each other to not let such incidents sabotage the progress of the peace process?
You have to acknowledge the fact that there were elements, and there are elements who do not want this agreement to go ahead. And they have tried to play the role of spoilers. Pakistan has been pointing it out throughout that there are spoilers. There are spoilers within Afghanistan, and there are spoilers in the region who do not want to see this agreement move ahead. But the good thing is that the important players of the region, important countries like Russia, like China, like the European Union, the United States, and other important players have endorsed this and are supporting this peace process. So we have to be vigilant of the spoilers. There are elements over there. I would not want this to happen, but the overwhelming majority, I think, feels that this is a right step at the right time.
Mr. Qureshi, you have rightfully said that Pakistan is being discussed positively for its role as a facilitator in the Afghan peace process for an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned solution. Does Pakistan's role end with the signing of the peace deal tomorrow?
You see, this now the responsibility has to shift towards Afghans. Hopefully, once the agreement is signed, there will be an environment created for an intra-Afghan dialogue. Now, that dialogue is amongst Afghans. Pakistan has no role in it. They have to sit and decide what kind of Afghanistan do they want, what kind of a political dispensation is good for them, they are comfortable with, how inclusive do they want to be, how do they sit together and chart out a way forward for peace and stability in Afghanistan? It's primarily their role. Pakistan will be supportive because Pakistan supports the peace process. Pakistan is supportive of reconciliation. Pakistan has been consistently supporting and advocating an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process.
As we have the opportunity to talk to you about the regional stability, let's now talk about India, with 38 Muslims killed in recent riots and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government overseeing a mass targeting of Muslims. India intends to render hundreds of thousands of Muslims stateless and has been very vocal in telling them to shift to Pakistan. If it comes to that, is Pakistan ready for any such mass migration?
Well, to begin with, what the world is seeing is horrific. The world is seeing how a secular democracy, the so-called secular democracy, has been overtaken by a Hindutva mindset. And not just the world, there are many within India who are scared of this transition taking place, and they are agitating, they are protesting. The opposition is, and many factions and minorities besides Muslims. Muslims are complaining. They are complaining because of the discriminatory nature of the Citizen Amendment Act. But do you think the Christians are secure? Do you think the Dalits, who are a lower caste Hindu caste, are they happy? Do you think the Sikhs are comfortable? Not at all. Jains, Buddhists, others? No. There is a huge voice today in India which is very unhappy with the policies that are being pursued by the present regime in Delhi. People are complaining. Major opposition leaders are even being critical of the role the Supreme Court is playing. For example, a judge who takes cognizance of police officers who were sort of overlooking what was going on in Delhi, in fact were facilitating and supporting people who were committing arson and torture over there. And that very judge has been transferred from Delhi to Haryana. Now, what kind of a justice is that going to be? Where will people go for justice? Now, who am I to say that? Indian leadership, prominent names in India, are tweeting about it, are complaining about it. So that is the shift that has taken place, and the world has taken notice. Writers, singers, actors, Foreign Relations Committee members of the U.S. Congress are complaining about it. Members of Parliament in the House of Commons, the European parliamentarians, members of the European Parliament have been talking about it. Human Rights Council in Geneva is discussing these issues, human rights violations.
We were in conversation with Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi about regional stability. Thank you for talking to Indus News. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet says 800 people remain in Indian forces detention in occupied Kashmir. Kashmir has been under a lockdown and communications blackout for nearly 7 months. In a tweet, Bachelet said heavy military presence in Kashmir has disrupted schools and businesses. She also said New Delhi did nothing to address the allegations of excessive use of force by the security forces. Earlier, she said the Citizenship Amendment Act passed by India last December was of great concern. She expressed concerns by reports of police inaction in the face of attacks against Muslims. The death toll in riots during the anti-citizenship law protests in India's capital, New Delhi, has risen to 42. Hindu radicals targeted 4 mosques, 79 Muslim houses, 52 shops, 2 schools, and 3 factories owned by the Muslims. Fire service officials say over 500 cars, trucks and buses were destroyed by the radicals. The US, France and Russia have issued security alert for their citizens in India due to growing incidents of mob violence by Hindu extremists. In their separate statements, the US and Russian embassies in Delhi cautioned their citizens against traveling in the country. Washington has also called on all the sides to refrain from violence and to maintain peace in the country. Protests broke out in Delhi after the ruling BJP government enacted the Citizenship Amendment Act, rendering millions of Muslims potentially stateless. The US has urged India to respect the right to peaceful assembly. The top US diplomat of South Asia, Alice Wells, called on all the sides to refrain from violence. The Democratic frontrunner, Bernie Sanders, has denounced President Donald Trump's response to anti-Muslim mob violence in India. The US Commission on International Religious Freedom has also criticized the Indian response, voicing alarm at the reports of police inaction. India has seen mass protests after Modi's Hindu nationalist government pushed forward a controversial citizenship law. In China, another 44 people have lost their lives to the new coronavirus in the last 24 hours, bringing the death toll to 2,788. Hopes to contain the virus are diminishing as the first case in the sub-Saharan Africa was reported in Nigeria. More in this report.
The coronavirus scare has gripped the world as new confirmed cases of the disease reported in regions outside China continue to rise. The World Health Organization says it is alarmed at the new figures and has urged countries to prepare themselves against the spread of the disease.
The increase in the rest of the world, we will see more cases, is a bad news. And especially in 3 countries, we're seeing clusters in Iran, in Italy, and also in Korea.
Afghanistan and Pakistan face a potential health crisis after the new coronavirus erupted in neighboring Iran. Pakistan closed its border with Iran after 2 individuals returning from the country were found to be infected. But people continue to cross between Afghanistan and Iran after the border was reopened following a temporary closure.
We have come from Tehran. As soon as we heard that the borders have been opened, we were happy. Doctors are checking travelers on the Iran and Afghanistan borders, and if the borders were not opened, we would be in trouble.
The fatal virus has now spread to 45 countries, infecting over 82,000 people. The outbreak in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia have fanned fears of poor countries without the healthcare infrastructure to cope with the challenges.
Iran says its death toll from coronavirus has risen to 26, with 245 cases, including several senior officials. The Vice President for Women and Family Affairs, Masooma Iftikhar, and Deputy Health Minister Iraj Harichi have also been infected. Officials say Iftikhar's case is mild and she was not hospitalized. A lawmaker, Mahmoud Sadeghi, has also tested positive for coronavirus. The outbreak prompted authorities to call off Friday prayers in several cities, including Tehran. State media said Tehran has banned Chinese nationals from entering the country. The death rate among confirmed cases of the virus has been higher in Iran than elsewhere. The coronavirus is spreading more quickly in Europe and other parts of the world than in China. The disease was detected for the first time in Estonia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Greece. Greece has reported 2 new cases in the past 24 hours, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to 3. In Switzerland, the number of confirmed coronavirus cases has risen to 4. Meanwhile, France has cancelled a big finale of a carnival in Nice that borders northern Italy over the coronavirus fears. The carnival in the southern city started on 15th of February and was set for the finale on Saturday. France is on high alert and has so far confirmed 2 deaths and 18 infections due to the virus in the country. Democratic presidential candidates have held rallies across South Carolina ahead of Saturday's primary. Racial justice and healthcare took center stage as candidates tried to woo the African American vote that dominates the state. More in this report.
The race for Democratic presidential nomination is gathering momentum as it enters its first decisive stretch. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders secured a critical victory in Nevada, but rivals warn his nomination could ensure U.S. President Donald Trump's re-election. Saturday's South Carolina primary is being dubbed as the first big test for early frontrunner Sanders. Sanders shelled out his message of unity and inclusiveness at a spirited campaign rally in Baffert College.
We are building a movement that cannot be stopped. It is a justice movement. It is a movement for economic justice, for social justice, for racial justice, for environmental justice. And when millions of people stand up and fight back, nothing on earth can stop us.
At a campaign rally at the Coastal Carolina University, former Vice President Joe Biden said he was the best candidate to take on Trump.
They spent $125,000 putting up ads that are flat lies to keep me from getting the nomination. I wonder why. Because if I get the nomination, I will beat him like a drum.
Leading the pre-poll service for South Carolina by a considerable margin now, Biden will hope the African-American vote will help to resurrect his stuttering White House bid on Saturday.
The U.S. says it will never recognize Russian claims of sovereignty over Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. In a statement, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said February 27 marked the 6th anniversary of Russia's annexation of Crimean Peninsula. He said the Russian occupation authorities continue to violate human rights and fundamental freedoms. Pompeo said the increasing militarization of the peninsula is a threat to common security. Moscow and Kiev have been at loggerheads since Russia annexed Crimea after a controversial referendum. Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vasilina Benzia, has urged the Security Council not to bury the Astana process. At the UNSC session, Germany, France and other countries urged Russia and Turkey to start talks in order to stop an escalation in Syria's Idlib. Benzia said Russia is working with the Syrian government to settle existing difficulties. He said the UN Security Council should not build up political pressure. Estonia's UN ambassador, Sven Jurgensen, disagreed with Moscow, saying the Astana format has failed. US Ambassador Kelly Craft also accused Russia and Iran of making the situation worse in Syria. The situation in Idlib escalated again early this month after fresh attacks by the government and the military forces. Malaysia's king has said the parliament will not hold a special session on Monday to decide the next prime minister. This follows the statement of interim Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad that the legislative body would hold a session to select the new prime minister. It's the latest twist in an ongoing political struggle that has gripped the country since last Sunday. Earlier this week, Mahathir resigned to break apart a coalition with his designated successor Anwar Ibrahim. The resignation followed rumours that Mahathir's party was planning to form a new government that would exclude Ibrahim. Greece is tightening its border controls on land and at sea to address the flow of the migrants and take tougher measures against the new coronavirus. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis says that border controls will be increased in accordance with the international law. Mitsotakis said he has ordered a significant increase in the number of the boats and patrols around the islands in the eastern Aegean Sea. The government's plan to construct new camps on the islands of Lesbos and Chios to relieve overcrowding in existing facilities sparked protests. Over 1 million refugees and migrants have reached Greece since 2015, mainly coming from the Turkish mainland. Athens currently hosts over 42,000 migrants on its islands. Libya says warlord Khalifa Haftar's forces have killed 21 civilians and wounded 31 others in the last 41 days. Officials at the Field Medical and Support Center said the casualties occurred in different areas in and around Tripoli. Besides men and women, the list of the casualties includes children, some only a few months old. Haftar's Eastern Army has been fighting with the UN-recognized government of the National Accord to take over the capital Tripoli since April last year. The UN and some European states have called on Libya's warring parties to cease the hostilities. Up till now, the sides have failed to reach a permanent agreement. The African Union has announced a temporary deployment of 3,000 troops in West Africa's Sahel region in response to a growing insurgency. AU's Peace and Security Commission Chief Samali Chergoi says the decision was taken at the organization's annual summit last month in Addis Ababa. Chergoi said the decision was prompted by the rise in the level of threat and its complexity. Last week, the UN said over 4,000 people in Burkina Faso have been forced out of their homes by a rising number of attacks on civilians. The bloodshed has escalated despite the presence of a 13,000-strong UN peacekeeping force in Mali. The UN says 4,000 people have died in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger in 2019, 5 times more than the levels of 2016.
To work on deploying a force of 3,000 troops to help the Sahel countries degrade terrorist groups. I think this is a decision that we will be working on together with the G5 Sahel and the ECOWAS.
In America's governments have resorted to a violent clampdown on hundreds of thousands of protesters, sometimes millions, who took to the streets in 2019. Amnesty International 2019 review says but the governments used measures in flagrant disregard for their obligations under domestic and international law. Amnesty says tsunami of protesters that swept across Latin America and the Caribbean last year were often met by repressive and increasingly militarized tactics. Reports said the year was marked by states' inability to channel people's discontent and demands for their rights. Amnesty noted Chilean and Venezuela's forces committed crimes and human rights abuses during crackdown on the protesters. Reports said U.S. government unlawfully detained children fleeing situations of violence in Central America. Amnesty warned U.S. President Donald Trump's asylum ban issued in July could be a death sentence for people seeking safety. It's time for a short break. I will be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In the UK, environmental activist Greta Thunberg says the climate emergency is being completely ignored by media and the politicians around the world. Addressing a climate rally in English city of Bristol, Thunberg said she will not be silenced when the world is on fire. Supporters held placards reading "Change the politics, not the climate." Police say over 30,000 people attended the rally, calling for immediate action to avert climate change. Thunberg has been in Britain since last weekend. On Tuesday, she met Malala Yousafzai and called her a role model. In the U.S., California power regulators have slapped Pacific Gas and Electric with a $2.1 billion fine for igniting a series of deadly wildfires. This comes after several consumer groups protested against the initial $1.7 billion settlement. Company officials say they are disappointed by the move after working diligently for many months with multiple parties. They say the business's fundamental obligation is to safely operate its systems. The harsher punishment also includes a $200 million payment to California's general fund. The company's outdated electricity grid and negligence during 2017 and 18 caused wildfires in which 130 people died and 28,000 homes were destroyed. A Syrian girl whose father taught her to laugh at the sound of the bombs has traveled to Turkey with her family. 3-year-old Salwa blew kisses to cameras as she arrived in Turkey to start a new life. This report has the details.
A week ago, a video of a 3-year-old girl's infectious laugh captured hearts around the world. Salwa's father, Abdullah Muhammad, came up with a game to help his daughter cope with the sounds of war. He encouraged her to simply laugh whenever bombs or shells landed in the vicinity.
When I know that there will be a strike, I immediately take out my phone and tell her to come. Let's take photos and so on. I turn the matter into a game so that she won't be afraid. Because if she was alone and saw that her mother is afraid and her father is afraid, then she will definitely be afraid.
Muhammad noted that many children suffer psychological hardships and stress due to daily airstrikes. He wanted to avoid Salwa suffering the same scars of war.
في طيارة اللي هي قذيفي قذيفي
احنا قصة دي بضحك
طلعت بيضحك معه قذيفي بيضحك.
He said that he managed to convince his daughter that these noises are similar to the sounds of fireworks. Salwa and her family have since been invited to live in Turkey. Muhammad has thanked the Turkish government for its support.
The Wall Street stocks tumble as the worries over the coronavirus and its impact on the economy continue to rattle investor sentiment. Shares of Apple, Caterpillar and JP Morgan Chase have dropped. The indices of S&P 500, Nasdaq Composite and Dow Jones Industrial Average reeled through the downward steam. Oil prices also slumped to their lowest in more than a year. The World Bank has restored relations with Somalia after a 30-year break, paving way for the country to have access to low-cost development aid. Contact was severed in 1991 as the country descended into conflict, facing violence from militant groups. World Bank Vice President for Africa, Hafiz Ghanem, said Somalia has made important reforms to drive the economy forward. Somalia has won initial approval from the World Bank and the IMF to get hundreds of millions in debt relief. Somalia's Finance Minister Abdurrahman Bilay said the approval is a recognition of the government's efforts to improve country's economy. Almost 70% of Somalis live on less than $2 a day. Rolls-Royce has reported operational losses of over $1 billion for 2019. In a statement, the company said 2019 losses have fallen from nearly $4 billion recorded in 2018. The company said the rollout of the technical fixes for the Trent 1000 is progressing well, with further measures underway to reduce customer disruption. It expects core operating profit to grow by about 15% this year, with at least £1 billion of free cash flow. The company has been working to resolve durability issues with its Trent 1000 engine, which powers Boeing's 787 Dreamliner. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now with the latest updates. You can follow us on social media at Indus.